we finally have the details on the Mitt Romney, Tom Cotton minimum wage plan. They just released it. New, Mitt Romney and Tom Cotton roll out a plan to raise the federal minimum wage to $10 per hour, incrementally over 5 years, tied to mandatory E-Verify for employers and stricter penalties for hiring people here illegally. So, we knew based on the previous leak that they were going to tie it to immigration. That's exactly what they did with the E-Verify thing. But I actually gave them too much credit. I sort of assumed that they would raise it to $12 an hour. That's what I thought, because the Democrats are saying 15. So, $12 is what the Democrats were calling for 4 years ago, 8 years ago, whatever it was. So I thought, yeah, they'll probably propose 12. No, they didn't even do that. And it's even worse than that because they want to raise it to $10 an hour and they want to do that over a 5-year period. Now, I believe the $15 minimum wage incremental implementation is over a 5-year period, but at least it gets to 15 over a 5-year period. They want to get it to 10 over a 5-year period. That's beyond pathetic. It's beyond pathetic. Why not just say, like right now, the federal minimum wage is $7.25. Why not say, hey, let's raise it to $7.26 over a 10-year period? Because the most important point is, this is what you have to take away from this story. They want to raise the minimum wage from not a living wage to still not a living wage. Guys, in Tom Cotton's home state, Arkansas, the minimum wage is, I think, $11 an hour. So he wants to raise the federal minimum wage to less than what the minimum wage is in his own state of Arkansas. And by the way, Arkansas, very rural state, and so if any state would have an incentive to keep it low because not as much capital in this state, you would think it's probably Arkansas. But Arkansas's minimum wage is $11 an hour. I mean, it honestly is incredible. This is honestly incredible. And there's an argument to be made that implementing this policy is worse than doing nothing. You want to know why? Because if you do this, you raise it to $10 an hour, tie it to inflation or median wage growth. What happens is you can never revisit the issue because you have the built-in increases in the wage. Because again, you tied it to, median wage increase or inflation. Now, so it'll go up steadily, but it will keep going up and it will never be a living wage. It'll never get to a living wage level. So, in other words, you waste political capital, you can never revisit the issue, and you still don't have a living wage. I would vote no on this in an instant. I'd vote no on this in an instant. And I love how they just sort of made up the number. Not to say 15 isn't made up. Kind of is. But at least in some states, maybe most states, it would be a living wage. With this, it's not. It's not. So really what we should be doing is looking at the research, talking to experts and economists. And, the idea that I've floated before on this show is that I think the best compromise is to do a living wage law. And you do a federal law that makes it a living wage county by county or voting district by voting district. So in other words, in a situation like that, yes, you might have the minimum wage in Arkansas is $11 because they've determined that's a living wage there. But it might be in New York, it's $23 or $24 because that might be what a living wage is there. And so you have, the different levels across the country. And I think that would almost guarantee that you don't have any increase in unemployment. There is a little bit of a concern that even with 15, you might have a slight uptick in unemployment. I think it's negligible, and I think there are other ways to address it, like subsidies or tax credits or whatever. But I do think if you do it that way, it would work out better across the board. I don't think they're going to do that. But the thing that concerns me is I think that with the Democrats saying 15, the Republicans now saying 10, you're going to have the so-called moderate Democrats, who are really just moderate Republicans, people like Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. They're going to come into the discussion and drop another number on us. We'll get to that in a little bit. I fear that what is going to happen is either no minimum wage increase or one that's not a living wage, not even close to a living wage, and it's tied to inflation or median wage growth, and then we perpetually, forever, have a minimum wage that's not a living wage, which I think is incredibly exploitative. I do. I think if you work full-time, you should make enough money to survive. Full stop. And I find it difficult to wrap my mind around the fact that anybody disagrees with that. If you work full-time, you should make enough money to survive. That's it. Period. And we don't have that situation right now. And every time I read about the minimum wage, it's always amazing to look at the numbers. So if you had it tied to inflation, it would be over $20 an hour right now. No, I'm sorry, that's tied to productivity. If you tied to productivity, it would be over $20 an hour right now. If you just kept it the same as it was, equal to $1968, I think it'd be between 10 and 12 right now. So it wasn't a living wage back then, but just keeping it the same as it was in 1968, if you had tied it to inflation, it'd be $10 to $12 today. There's a whole bunch of wild facts like that. And I don't think this is a serious proposal. I don't think they're having a serious conversation. I think they're still siding with the business owners. And this will be, or big corporations, I should say, this would be a move that would waste political capital and still not get us to a living wage, and then we could never revisit the issue. So I say hell no to it. Hell no to it. It's $15 an hour, or it's living wage per county, or that's it. I wouldn't bend on 10 or 12 or whatever, because, again, it would still not be a living wage, and then we can never revisit the issue because they're going to tie it to something, meaning wage growth or inflation. So this is a joke of a proposal. It's comical. The fact that Tom Cotton's home state minimum wage is higher than it says everything you need to know. The phase in over 5 years for a $10 per hour minimum wage, it's a joke. It's beyond a joke.